Good morning, class. We'll now continue whatever we have left behind yesterday and then go on to scaling out concept on HDFS cluster. Okay, in the last class, we have seen how to write programs for Java, mapper and reducer. In order to perform the map task, how to override a function map that is already defined in the mapper superclass, and how to override a function reduce that is already defined in the reducer class. Right? Anyway, we'll go through the code once again today and now see how to pack those two classes, mapper class and reducer class, how to pack them together into a job, convert it into a Java archive file and put it onto the cluster for performing the task simultaneously. Right? After that, we'll go on the concept of scaling out. So far, we have worked only on single machine in a pseudo distributed mode. Now, how to scale this task up, how to scale up this processing to multiple machines on HDFS cluster. Okay, that also will be covered in today's class. Now, in the last class, we have seen that we need to perform three things in order to set up this map reduce task into working process. So that is a map function. We need to write a map function, a reduce function, and some code to run the job. Now this is the mapper class we have seen yesterday. We understood while writing this class that Hadoop has data types as int writable for Java's integer and long writable for Java's long int and text for Java's string data types, right? And in order to override the map function, we need to extend the mapper superclass into whichever class you write your map functions code. Okay, so we have taken this public class map max temperature mapper, which extends the superclass mapper, which will help us to override this map function. And this map function takes as input key value pairs and writes as output again key value pairs. And that we have mentioned here in the template very clearly. Now in this map function, we are going to first extract the substrings that pertains to year in which the temperature is captured and the air temperature measurements. Okay, those two are obtained into the year variable and the air temperature variable. Now after finding out whether the air temperature is properly captured or not by comparing it with its quality code, we take this year as the key and the air temperature list of values captured in that particular year. Those two will be given again as key value pair output to the reduce phase as input. This map function gives the output as key value pairs. The key is the year and the value is the list of air temperatures that are recorded in that particular year. Now this is taken as output from the map phase and given as input to the reducer phase, on the way performing some shuffling and sorting tasks, some kind of pre-processing of the key value pair. Now, in order to process this reduce input, we have to write a reducer class. The input that is given, the output that is given by the map phase is taken as input by the reducer phase. Now we have to customize the reduce function in order to process this input that is taken by the reduce phase. For that, we have written a reduce function. We have overridden the reduce function that is defined in the reducer superclass, which we have imported from org.apache.hadoop's map reduce package. Okay. Now this reduce function also takes what kind of input? Key value pairs. Again, it gives as output key value pairs. Now what kind of key value pair it takes as input? It takes the year as the key and the list of air temperatures that are recorded in that particular year as values. Okay, and every time you write the reduce class or map reduce function or map function, you need to attach a context object which will help us to pack the data into that context object and transfer it between phases of map and reduce. Right now we have implemented some code, we have written some code in order to find the maximum temperature in the list of temperatures that are recorded in each year. For that we are using the math.max function, and we are comparing with the so far recorded maximum value and the encountered A temperature in the list of A temperature values, and finding out the maximum out of them. And finally, by the end of this for each loop, you will get the maximum temperature that is recorded in that year by going through all the A temperatures in the list. Okay, now you pack that into the context object with the right method by taking the key and the value components. Now is our actual task. You have to focus here in order to understand the code very clearly. Now we have to pack this map job and reduce, we have to pack this map task and reduce task into a job, right? Means you are again packing it into one particular package and creating a creating representatives of this job and deploying it onto various nodes on HDFS cluster in order to preserve the feature of data locality. What do you mean by data locality? You remember, right? We have come through this concept in last few classes. Data locality is we are sending the computation to the data nodes where the data resides rather than passing the data to and fro between the data nodes, right? Say in a cluster you have various data nodes. Now data is distributed across these data nodes. Now, rather than passing the data to and fro between these data nodes, you pass the computation to the nodes where the data reside in order to save the network bandwidth or overcome the issues of network congestion in case large volumes of data is being transferred. Right? In order to save from these drawbacks or in order to save from these issues, we are trying to implement the concept of data locality with this HDFS cluster. So rather than passing the data to and fro, we are passing the computation. We are just transferring the map function and the reduce functions onto the data nodes where the data is actually stored. Right? In order to do this, we need to pack map job and reduce map task and reduce task into a job. Let us see how we do that. Now, in order to perform some data processing, you need to read the data from an input file and you have to write the output of reduce phase to an output file. Right? For that, you need to have access to those file paths. So you need to import fs.path class in order to create the instances of those files. Okay, so you import org.apache.hadoops file system.path class. Now you also have to work with some integer values and string values, so import them too. And you are going to pack map and reduce classes into a job. So you have to import map reduce packages job class, and you also have to give the file input and output formats so that it can be understood by the map reduce task. In order to read a file from Hadoop URL or Hadoop's file system or write a data to file system on Hadoop, the file output formats or input formats can be easily understood by Java program. But we need to make it compatible enough to be understood by MapReduce program also. That is why we are importing org.apache.hadoop's MapReduce packages, library subpackage, input packages, file input format class, and in the same way we are taking the file output format class also. Right? Now you write the main class max temperature, which will help us to pack the job by including mapper class and reducer class into it. Okay, so you start with the main function. This is the actual class which packs the job for us. Okay, so this function, this class should have the main function. The public static void main throws exception if any IO exceptions arises, or in general if any exception arises, including IO exception, interrupted exception, right? If any of such exceptions arises, it can be called by the system itself directly. Now, if argument length means if the command line arguments that are passed, what would be the command line arguments that would be passed here? The input file from which the data has to be read for processing, and the output file to which the result has to be written. Two file paths have to be passed as command line arguments. Now, if these command line arguments are taken and find their length, it is not equal to 2. Means you are not passing sufficient arguments to invoke this map reduce task. In order to invoke this map reduce task, what are the minimal arguments you require? Input path from which the data has to be read, and output path to which the final result have to be written. Now these two are the minimal amount of arguments that need to be passed to this class in order to perform the map reduce job. That is why you are checking the argument string vector length. If it is not equal to 2, understand this carefully, if it is not equal to 2, you are not passing sufficient amount of file paths. In such cases, display an error, system.err print ln. What does it print? The usage should be in such a way that you have to pass the class name for which it has to be run. Means this class file has to be given to the interpreter in order to run this job, right? How you execute a program in Java? By giving Java interpreter Java and give the class name max temperature here. And what are the two command line arguments that are required? The input file path and the output file path. Right? So we are giving the template here. It should appear in this format. The usage should be in this format. What is that? Max temperature. This should be the input path. Input path should be passed, and one output path also should be passed. Okay, this is the template that has to be followed, which is displayed as an error message, which indicates that this should be the appropriate format that has to be followed to invoke this class execution. Now, after displaying the message, system exit, you conclude the program, exit from the run by giving some appropriate number. Okay, so this is how you need to handle an error which would occur when some wrong number of command line arguments are passed. Right? Now, okay, you handled what would go wrong in the initial stage. After that, if everything is fine, if the user invoked this program by giving the input path from which the data has to be read for processing and the output path to which the final result have to be written. Now, everything is fine. Now, what has to be done? First, you have to create a job instance. You're going to create a job that has to be run. So you're going to create one particular job for MapReduce framework. Now remember, MapReduce can run hundreds of thousands of such multiple jobs, right? But here we are trying to learn how one single job can be created. So initially you have to create a job instance. See, job is the class. This job is the object which is being created as new instance of the job class. Got it? Now, using this job object, you are going to invoke setJar by class method, which takes the class file as parameter, which takes this class file as parameter. You know that when a Java class has to be compiled, we supply the .java file, max temperature.java. Now, when this the Java file is compiled, it creates an object file with max temperature dot class extension. You know that very well, right? Now that dot class, that object file is required, which can be converted into a Java archive file. Now this Java archive file will be handed over to the data nodes on HDFS cluster in order to perform this MapReduce task. Got it? Now the next step is set the name of the job. You know that multiple jobs will be running on HDFS cluster. At the same time, you need to identify this job uniquely. That is why you're setting the name of this job. How do you set the name? Any name you can give. But it is always better to give the name which indicates the purpose of that job. You're trying to find maximum temperature recorded in every year over 100 years, right? So you give the job name as max temperature. Now you have to hand over the input file to the job from which the data has to be read, and also hand over the output file to the job to which the result has to be written. Students, anybody wanted to stop me to ask something? Okay. Now you take file input format, add the input path. Now using file input format class, see this class you have imported, 5th line of this program. You have imported file input format, right? File input format dot add input path. What is the input path that has to be added to the job? You pass the job object, comma, the path to the input file. How is the path obtained? As a new instance of the first command line argument that is passed. This is the command line argument that is passed as input path. That is taken as the file, and that is taken as the path which can be added to the job object. Right. Now the job object has mapper class, the job object has the input file from which the data can be read for processing. Understand this carefully. The job object now has the input path from which the data has to be read for processing. Now you should also attach the output file path. So take file output format class, invoke the method set output path. Now how you are setting the output path to the job? By taking new instance of the second command line argument. What is the second command line argument? This one, that is passed, to which the result has to be written. Right? This is passed as second command line argument, and for that also a path has been handed over to the job. Right? Input file is ready to start the job, to start the reading task, and output file is also ready in order to write the result to. Now what is the next step? You have to set the mapper class and you have to set the reducer class also. Now what is your next step here? By using the job object, you are setting the mapper class with which class, with which object file? Max temperature mapper dot class file. You remember, this is the Java class we have written yesterday. Max temperature mapper is the class which will help us to define the map function. So that dot class file you're taking and adding it to the job object by using set mapper class. You are using set mapper class method in order to set this class to the job object. In the same way, you also have to use max temperature reducer dot class file in order to set the reducer class. I'm repeating again. You have to take the dot class file of max temperature reducer in order to set it as reducer class to the job object. Okay. Now you have taken you have taken max temperature mapper dot class file and handed it over to the job, and you have taken max temperature reducer dot class file and handed it over to the job. Now what does job contain? It contains the file input path, the mapper class, the reducer class, and the output file path to which the result has to be written. Is it very clear, students, now? The job contains 4 components now. The input file path from which the data has to be read for processing, the mapper class in order to perform the map task, the reducer class in order to perform the reduce task, in order to consolidate the result, and finally the output file path to which the result has to be written. Fine. Now almost the packing of the job is completed, and you have 2 more things to do. What are those? Set the output key class to the text type and output value class to int type. Why we have to do this? The output file should understand what kind of data it is receiving as key value pairs as a result to be written to the output file. So that has to be conveyed by the job itself, by the job object itself. Understand this carefully. The output file should understand what kind of data it is receiving from the reducer phase. So you have to set the output key class as a string value and the output value class as an integer value. So you are making the output compatible enough to the output that is passed by the reducer phase, and that also you are handing it over to the job. Now your entire task of packing the job is complete. Now what is your task remaining at hand? You have to start executing the job and wait for its completion. See the last line here. By using the job object, invoke wait for completion method, and it receives verbose flag as argument here. Boolean value, true or false. Now we are taking this verbose flag as true if it passes 0, means if wait for completion is true, means if it is waiting for completion of the task, then give it as 0. If the task is completed, give it as 1. Now when this 1 is received by exit as parameter, this exits from the job. This indicates that the job has been completed. I'll explain this once again. Job object is used to invoke the method wait for completion, which indicates that the job is under process and it is waiting for the completion of the job. Now that we have taken the verbose flag as true. That parameter that the parameter that wait for completion method receives, we are taking it as true. Now wait for completion, as long as it is waiting for completion, as long as it is true, as long as the status is true, that is it is waiting for completion of the task, it returns 0. Else, if the task has been completed, it returns 1. Now when this system.exit method receives 1, it indicates the task has been completed and the job is terminated. Right? This is how the map reduce task runs on HDFS cluster. Is it clear, students? Shall we move on to the next topic, scaling out? Kavya? Akash? Are you all there, Vaishnavi?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Did you understand? Can we move further?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. So now we'll see on how to scale out this kind of jobs. We have seen that We have seen so far how to work with one single machine in a pseudo distributed mode, that too to process small amounts of data. But how does this task, how can we scale up this task in order to work on multiple machines and in order to work with huge volumes of data? Because that is the real scenario, right? Why do you use distributed computing? Only when you come across large volumes of data, correct? So we have to see how to scale out our task, how to increase the capacity of our task in order to work with large volumes of data. To allow Hadoop to move the map-reduce computation to each machine hosting a part of the data, the process is as follows. Remember, you are trying to move the map-reduce computation to the machines hosting the data to preserve data locality, to preserve the feature of data locality. What is the process for this? A map-reduce job is a unit of work that the client wants to be performed. Yes, for processing the data. It consists of the input data. Yes, we know that, which can be read from the input file path that is passed to the job, object, and the map reduce program. Yes, which performs the map task and the reduce task one after the other. Remember, until the map task is completed, reduce task will not be initiated. Okay, that you have to remember. They will not be executed simultaneously. Once the map task is completed, then the reduce task, at least partially the map task has to be completed before initiation of the reduce task, because at least some information should be given as input to the reduce task from the map task. Okay, so you can see when you are executing the real map reduce jobs, you can see that reduce task will not be initiated until at least some of the map task has been completed. They will not start simultaneously. Okay, so it consists of the input data. The map reduce job consists of input data, the map reduce program, and the configuration information. It has to know the client or server configuration of the machine on which it is running. That is very, very important, right? In order to resolve some compatibility issues. Now, Hadoop runs the job by dividing it into tasks, yes, of which there are two types. What are those two types of tasks? The map task and the reduce task. We know that. There are two types of nodes that control the job execution process. Again, two other guests will come into our discussion now. We already learned about name node, secondary name node, and data node. Now, two extra guests are coming into our discussion. They are job tracker and task tracker. You might have remembered that initially I spoke about 5 Hadoop daemons that have to be run on a HDFS cluster. Whenever you are starting your HDFS cluster, it has to run 5 HDFS daemons. What are those daemons? Name node, secondary name node, data node, job tracker, and task tracker. Okay, now we are going to understand about this job tracker and task trackers. There are two types of nodes that control the job execution process. In order to make the job execution reliable, in order to make the job execution fault tolerant, in order to coordinate between number of map reduced tasks, there is a monitor, there is a leader which will monitor this entire task, job tracker, and this task, these number of tasks are delegated to the task trackers by the job tracker. Okay, job tracker is like the team leader and task trackers are like the team members. Now the job tracker coordinates all the jobs run on the system by scheduling tasks to run on task tracker. Okay, so what is the job tracker's responsibility? It will coordinate what all jobs that have to be run on the system by scheduling, by assigning them to various task trackers. Okay, again, you might have observed master slave pattern here. In the initial stage, name node is the master, the data nodes are the slaves. That is a master slave pattern. Here again, we can see that job tracker is the master and task trackers are the slaves. Again, a master slave pattern is observed. Now, task trackers run tasks and send progress reports to the job tracker. That is very much required, right? When some team is working on some project, every day the progress have to be reported by the team members to the team leader. Same thing happens here. Task trackers run tasks and send progress reports to the job tracker, which keeps a record of the overall progress of each job. Now, one receives the progress report from all the task trackers that all the jobs have been completed, then this job tracker will indicate that the entire job is accomplished. Entire job is completed. Okay, so if a task fails, the job tracker can reschedule it on a different task tracker. Yes, job tracker will take care of the node failures or task failures or data corruption. All these kinds of issues, if they arise, job tracker will resolve them. If a task fails, why does a task fail? Data node can fail, corrupted data it may encounter. In such cases, if the task fails, the job tracker can reschedule it on a different task tracker, another task tracker, another node which is healthy. The task can be shifted onto that data node, right? And that is taken care by the job tracker. Now, Hadoop divides the input to a map reduce job into fixed size pieces called input splits or just splits, or they can also be called as data chunks. Okay, data is not as it is handed over to one single machine to process it. It is divided into parts. They are divided into fixed size. Remember, this is important. Fixed size pieces called input splits or just splits. Why? Why can't they have variable size? You should ask me that doubt immediately. Why only fixed size? Why not variable lengths? If one piece is too large, it requires more time to complete the processing. If one piece is too small, it completes the processing very fast, and that task tracker will be left idle until all the large sized chunks are processed. This will create an imbalance in the tasks that are assigned to the machines. Some machines will always be busy. Some machines will become idle in no time. This will create cluster imbalance. In order to avoid that, map-reduced jobs are always, the input to the map-reduced jobs are always divided into fixed size pieces called as input splits. Every topic or every point, when I put it across to you, you should think on that. Rather than leaving your ears to me and thinking somewhere else, just think on each and every point I'm putting forward to you. Then immediately you will have some doubts if you are keeping track with my explanation. Students, you have to focus. Hadoop creates one map task for each split, which runs the user-defined map function for each record in the split. Now, what does the Hadoop do as next step? Yes, it receives input splits. Now Hadoop creates one map task for each split. Each split is worked upon, is processed by one map task, which runs the user-defined map function. We have written this map function, right? In max temperature mapper, we have written the map function. In max temperature reducer, we have written the reduce function. You remember? Now, this map task runs the user-defined map function for each record in the split. Right, means that split is being processed by the map function. According to the code you have written in the map function, In this map function, according to the example we have taken, what does the map function do? It takes the year in which the temperature is captured and list of 8 temperatures captured in that particular year. That is the code we have written. But you may have many other kinds of processing tasks. According to that, you have to customize the code in the map function. Okay. Now, having many splits means the time taken to process each split is small compared to the time to process the whole input. Obvious, that is quite obvious. If you want to compare the time to process the whole input, it is more. But if you split them into smaller pieces and start working on them, the time will be smaller because you work on them simultaneously. Here map task also does the same thing. It is here you're dividing the input into multiple splits. Each of those split is assigned to one map task on one data node and executed simultaneously, which will give you the result in no time. So if we are processing the splits in parallel simultaneously with multiple threads, the processing is better load balanced. Yes, when the splits are small, since a faster machine will be able to process proportionally more splits over the course of the job than a slower machine. Now, what is the advantage of splitting the data into smaller parts? You can assign these splits onto map jobs which can run more number of splits because they are small. It completes processing processing of one split, takes another split, process it, takes another split, process it. This is done very fast. It is not that one map task executes only one split at a time. Once it completes its map task, executing its map code on one split, it immediately takes its next split, process it, takes another split, processes it. It goes on very fast. Okay, so you try to achieve better load balancing by keeping the splits as small as possible. Now, even if the machines are identical, failed process or other jobs running concurrently make load balancing desirable. And the quality of the load balancing increases as the splits become more fine-grained. As you keep the splits as small as possible, the load balancing is achieved in a much larger sense, right? Now, on the other hand, if splits are too small, again, there is a disadvantage. There is a limit, right? Whenever you're eating something, don't eat too much. Or whenever you're not eating, that is also not good. Everything should be balanced. On the other hand, if splits are too small, the overhead of managing the splits and of map task creation begins to dominate the total job execution time. Now, if you keep on reducing the size of the splits too much in order to achieve load balancing, then overhead of managing these number of splits and the map task creation for those splits, corresponding map task creations for those splits, that itself will start dominating the total job execution time. So managing the splits will become an overhead to you than getting advantage from the total job execution time. So you have to balance, you have to know where to stop fine graining the splits, where to stop making the splits smaller and smaller. What is the ideal size? For most jobs, a good split size tends to be the size of an HDFS block. What is the HDFS block default size? 64 MB, right? Although this can be changed for the cluster for all newly created files or specified when each file is created. So you can customize what should be the good amount of split size. Okay, it is in your hands to define each time what would be the size of split that can be passed on to a map job. Now, Hadoop does its best to run the map task on a node where the input data resides in HDFS. This is again, yeah, we have another 10 minutes. Let me complete. So Hadoop does its best to run the map task on a node where the input data resides in HDFS. So the Hadoop will try to locate the data node where the data resides and tries to run the map task on the same node. This is called as data locality optimization. Hadoop tries to optimize the map task running onto the data node where the data resides, right? Because it doesn't use valuable cluster bandwidth, because it will help us to avoid data transfer. Say there is a data node where the data resides. You're sending the map, you're assigning the map task to that data node. Data is local to it, so it quickly executes the task. Now, consider a scenario where the data node where the data resides, it is not free to execute a map task. Then what will happen? Hadoop has to locate another data node which is free to perform the map task. And if the data doesn't exist there, then the data have to be transferred, no other way, which will consume the cluster bandwidth. You understood the disadvantage? The Hadoop always tries to optimize data locality feature. It will try to locate a data node where the data resides and assigns the map job in order to process that data. But if that data node is not free to take up the map task, it is already running many other map tasks. In such cases, you can't help, you have to pass the data between the nodes. Okay, so it has to utilize cluster bandwidth in such cases. Sometimes, however, all three nodes hosting the HDFS block replicas, 3 copies if you're maintaining, for a map task input split are running other map tasks. If other map tasks are running on those data nodes, so the job scheduler will look for a free map slot on a node in the same rack as one of the blocks. Got it? So if the data node on which the data is residing is not free to execute a map task because it is already crowded with other map tasks, in that case, the job scheduler, what does it do? It will look for a free map slot on a node in the same rack as one of the blocks. First, it tries to locate something on the same rack so that the bandwidth, so that the distance is not too far. Now, very occasionally, if that data node is also busy, even if this is not possible, then what does it do? An off-rack node is used. If on the same rack, another data node is also busy with other map tasks, then only it will go for an off-rack data node. Means a data node on a different rack, but in the same cluster. Okay, which results in an inter-rack network transfer. We can't help it. The data node on which the data is residing, it is busy. So it tries to locate a data node in the same rack, but so it tries to locate a different data node in the same rack that is also busy. Now, what is the next option? Locate a data node on a different rack. This results in inter-rack network transfer. You can't help it. All the data nodes in the same rack are busy, means it goes to a different rack's data node where the block of data is available to perform the processing. For this, the data has to be transferred. If it is a different data node that doesn't contain the block. If it contains the block of data, okay, it will execute. But if it doesn't contain the data, then data has to be transferred from somewhere else to this data node, which is free to perform the task of processing. Okay, so what is happening here? Local running of the processing not happening. It goes to a different node on the rack. Still, that is also busy. It goes to a data node on a different rack and tries to execute that. That is exceptional. Beyond that, that case may be exceptional, because if 2-3 nodes are not free, still 3rd or 4th nodes will be free. So the data processing takes place. But what is the disadvantage of this is it has to utilize cluster bandwidth. It has to perform inter-rack network transfer, which will which if it occurs more frequently, it may cause bandwidth bottlenecks. Okay, so that is these are the issues that can be encountered in scaling out when you actually work with more number of jobs on HDFS cluster. That is explained in this figure. You can see here, this is the map task that has to be run, and this is the HDFS block. Now, if this this node is busy with the map task, with other map tasks, in such cases, it may have to go for inter-rack transfers. Initially, if this HDFS block contains the data, this map task can be executed on that data node itself. But if that data node is busy with other map tasks, then it will go for a different node on a different rack. You can see this is one cluster. This is one cluster of data nodes. This is one cluster of data nodes. In this, each part is called as a rack. And this entire thing is the data center. Understand the setup here. This entire part is called as the data center. In this data center, you have cluster 1, cluster 2, and cluster 3. Now, under each cluster, you have racks. These white things are called as racks. In these racks, you have the data nodes or the processing units. Now, if one HDFS block is free to, if the data node on which the block resides, it is free, it will take up the map task. But if it is running many other map tasks, then it will search for a different data node on a different rack to execute the map task. Now, still that is also engaged, then it will go on to a different cluster to locate a node on a different rack and assigns the map task to perform the processing task. Right? This is how, say, data locality is actually not achieved due to busy data nodes in some cases, not all the time. Okay? That is, these are the rare cases. If there are too many jobs executing and if the data nodes are too busy, then the extreme case is to transfer the data between the nodes by utilizing the network bandwidth. Okay. In next class, we'll see further some more discussion on this scaling out topic. Any doubts, students, still here? Benita, any doubts? Lata?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you understood well?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. Okay, I'll stop the recording and take the attendance.